sister. You are my brothers and sisters. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. So my name is Dolores Cahill. And why I'm here is that I am an immunologist, a molecular biologist, but most of all, I am a mother. I am a daughter. I am an aunt. And I am very honored and proud that my experience can help in this moment, this historical year of 2020, to shine light on what is going on in Ireland and in the world. It's my privilege. So very quickly, I just want to tell you why the lockdown happened, why it was never justified, where we are now, why the 30th of September 2020 in the Houses of Parliament is a historic moment for the United Kingdom and the world, and if the lockdown is extended in the United Kingdom, what I would be recommending and supporting that you do in the United Kingdom. Okay? And in case this is videoed and you don't watch to the end, I will be saying that I would be supporting taking the members of Parliament, Matt Hancock, Priti Patel and Boris Johnson, that I have looked into it, and it takes 10% in a constituency to do a recall, and that I would be supporting every constituency that between this and the 30th of September that you write to your members of Parliament. And it was my privilege to talk on Tuesday to a member of Parliament, and I said to him, you have a historic duty. Every single one of you are leaders. Every single one of you have a voice in the Houses of Parliament, whether you're in the Houses of Lords or the House of Commons. They are elected. They are paid. They get a pension. They have a duty to do an analysis. Every single one of them. Every single one of them can have their own public inquiry in a hotel and invite me and the 20 other or thousands of other people in the world that are standing up against this. And if they don't, they are colluding.
Yes.
And what they are declaring on the 30th of September, if they extend the lockdown in the United Kingdom, every single one of those members of Parliament, I told him, do not deserve to get re-elected for 20 years. For a generation, they can hang their heads in shame. And if the lockdown is extended on the 30th of September 2020, I will be inspiring. So I'm invited on the 10th of October 2020 to Berlin to speak to 10 million people. I'm in touch with people. But what I will be saying for the UK on the 30th of September, I'm handing on the baton to you and everyone in the United Kingdom, that on the 30th of September 2020 is D-Day for this generation and the elderly in the care homes. It's D-Day. And if they don't do anything on the 10th of October 2020 to 10 million people in Berlin, I will be asking all the people of the world to set up freedom parties, just to have an election and a recall and a referendum on how the lockdown is handled, and to have an election before Christmas 2020 in countries in the world. And I'm now working with 30 to 35 countries around the world, and we are now looking for evidence from now for public inquiries in each country, and we're setting up a legal tribunal based on the Nuremberg Tribunal for crimes against humanity. So each one of you can write, and I would be asking as well for you to remember the elderly in the care homes, and just write a little note if it's your neighbour this week, if it's your neighbour, if it's your grandaunt, if it's your aunt, if it's your grandparents, please just write to the elderly and say we have not forgotten them. Because in Ireland they have said they are even stopping window visits.
Jesus.
So that if you have a grandchild that has their first communion, that they are not allowed, the person in the care home, to actually even see their grandchild. That is shocking. So what we are doing is that these elderly, they built our countries. We love them. They are our family. And if you don't have children in a care home, we know you are our cousins or our aunts and uncles, our neighbours, and you deserve better. They are not prisoners. So what I'm saying, on the 30th of December 2020, everyone shine a light on your members of parliament, and they have to vote, and it has to be published for who votes for the lockdown. And if they vote to extend the lockdown, they are voting that the elderly are confined to their rooms, that they don't get sunlight, they don't get hugs from their families and their grandchildren, and they don't go out for Sunday dinner. And if they vote to extend the lockdown, they are declaring war on the grandparents, the grandmothers and grandfathers, on the elderly generation, and we are not having it. So basically, I'm asking each of you here and each of you listening to this to write a letter to your Member of Parliament, but most of all to write a letter to Priti Patel, to Matt Hancock and to Boris Johnson to say, you not in our name. You are not extending the lockdown in our name. So not in our name, no extension of the lockdown. Not in our name. The elderly are not prisoners. Free the elderly. Free your grandparents. Free your grandparents. Free the elderly in the care homes. They have freedom of speech. The elderly have freedom of assembly. They have the right to leave. And if you know an elderly person in the care home, they should ask to leave and come and visit your house. And then let the care home or the people in the healthcare service call the police and try and arrest a 90-year-old person who's making free choice to leave the care home. So free the elderly! Free the elderly! Free the elderly from the care homes! And if Boris Johnson has to take responsibility, so this is a little message for Boris Johnson, for Priti Patel and Matt Hancock. Everybody search the 11th of September 2020 World Health Organization Director General when he declared the pandemic in the whole world between December, January, February and March. Out of 7,000 million people, 4,291 people had died from SARS-CoV-2. So that's 1% of the annual flu deaths. Coronaviruses are seasonal. They have caused most ill health between December and April. So they only had 1% of the annual flu death. So on the date that it was called, there was no reason for the pandemic. On day one, there was no reason ever. Pandemic. So if these members of parliament were doing their job, it's just common sense. You would expect a pandemic to be multiples of the annual flu deaths, right? Not 1%. So there was no reason for the pandemic, and it has been known for 40, 50 years that if you declare a pandemic, you will have shutdown of the economy, and that will cause multiple more deaths in undiagnosed cancers, in suicides, in depression, cardiovascular disease. And so what they've been doing, as you know, we've had, some of us have threats to our health, threats to our jobs, threatened to be arrested. But what do we say? Bring it on! Bring it on! Because what they are doing is, you are the people who work and pay taxes to pay the salaries of all these people. All the people on the SAGE committee, all the people on the advisory committee in Ireland, all the civil service writing their guidelines. And what this has done is revealed how governments work. And they are using your taxes, pushing them up to the United Nations, to the World Health Organization, to the European Union, So that if they want to manipulate or engineer a society, they just say, oh, it's not us, we're getting best advice from the United Nations. And if you're on social media now, they say, oh, you know, the World Health Organization, that's where all the advice comes from. But those people are not accountable. And then, so you have all these layers of civil service and agencies and employed people in Parliament and ministers and Boris Johnson all getting fat salaries, fat pensions, and also, you know, a social standing, as if we are locking the elderly in our homes. We are causing teenagers anxiety by wearing masks because we care. We care, but of course nobody is actually producing the evidence to show that isolating the elderly has more benefit than harm. And I am staking my reputation that what they're doing is more harm than good.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So how we get them is through the democratic process. Okay, so you guys have to register for election, write to your members of parliament, write to the accountable ministers and say, not in our name. Okay? Not in our name. And then, you know, you just have to threaten, but actually you can set up freedom parties and all of you can stand for election. Or we could actually have the elderly in care homes stand for election. That's the democratic process. But the other thing you can do is make the individuals making these guidelines and ministers and heads of departments personally accountable. Because they use your money and your hard work and your taxes and your faith in them against us. And they're not providing any evidence for what they're doing. So all you have to do is write a simple letter, right? The pen is mightier than the sword. And hold them personally accountable through a notice of liability. And you can search for one, they're there. So you can just say, if I was 80 years old in a care home, I would say, I want to go and hug my grandchildren. I want to go out for Sunday lunch. And you, as their family, or they can write a notice of liability to the care home owner or to their doctor and say, you have to prove to me that it's more beneficial to my health to be locked up and not get hugs and not get sunshine and not keep touch with my family. And if this is not the case, I am putting you on a notice of liability. And if they do something wrong, it's called malfeasance. And in the United Kingdom, if they are actually forcing you to do something like not get sunshine, be isolated, under malfeasance, which anyone can take, it's 5 years in prison. 5 years in prison. So malfeasance is for a care home owner. Now, obviously, we don't want to be doing it, but they are lying to you. They are saying these guidelines, it's actually better for you to wear a mask. It's better for you to be isolated. It's better for you to not take a tested vaccine than to take a preventative medicine that's been licensed for 70 years and is an essential medicine of the world. And that will boost your immune system. And there has been 10 Nobel Prizes for vitamins. Okay, so you can eat well, have vitamins, take zinc, have preventative hydroxychloroquine. So what I'm also in Ireland, we have managed to bring down the number of total deaths in Ireland from COVID-19 to 96 in the whole year for everybody. 96 people out of 5 million, 0 deaths, 0 COVID-19 deaths in Ireland in December, January, February, March. And we did that very simply by saying to the coroners, we can go through all the 1,700 deaths that you are falsely reporting and then ask the families to contact me and go through each death. And if it was a car accident or Alzheimer's and you put down COVID-19, that's a crime and you can be struck off. And the coroners can be held criminally liable for falsely reporting. And there is a separate crime now, so we are now calling, if anyone in Ireland is listening to this, for those 96 deaths, that if actually someone has a death cert that still has COVID-19 on it, but they know that their loved one died of something else, get in contact with me, Dolores Cahill at gmail.com. And we will look into every one, because all of those deaths were from April to September. Coronaviruses don't really cause illness after April, so it doesn't make any sense. But second of all, we can look into each of those deaths and see if they died in the care home or with their doctor, were they given good nutrition? Were they given vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, and were they given preventative treatments or treatments like inhaled steroids or hydroxychloroquine? And if they weren't, the doctor is personally accountable, and the family can sue the doctor for unnecessary death. So the governments, I'm afraid, this is another little message for Boris Johnson, Matt Hancock, Priti Patel. They are basing the lockdown on the increased numbers of deaths potentially. But of course, if you have a disease where you can prevent it and treat it, nearly every single case, that means that every death now and this winter was preventable. So you're dealing with, for the minister, malfeasance in public office, which is a crime of 5 years. You're dealing with the doctors who are colluding in criminal manslaughter and in preventable deaths, and in the coroners falsely reporting. So we have now woken up, and so there should be no deaths of COVID-19. There is prevention and treatment. Any doctor that is associated with that can be struck off. Any civil servant or care home worker, the families can sue them under notice of liability and criminal and civil malfeasance for 5 years in prison. So it's not looking so pretty now, the lockdown, is it? It's not looking so pretty, and the reason why this is important is that I will put my reputation that the continuation of the lockdown is more harm than good. And any doctor, any civil service, any member of parliament, any prime minister involved in enforcing something with the power of the state through so-called guidelines and police powers and threatening, that is more harm to the general population and specific people like teenagers wearing masks, small business owners and restaurants that have been put out of business for no reason, and the elderly that have been isolated in care homes, not spending the last years of their lives getting hugs from their families and their grandchildren, that is doing more harm than good. We have to stop it on the 30th of September, and I'm happy that they are informed that what they're doing is criminal. We're not having it, and thank you very much.
Thank you!